My husband laughed when they took my seat at a charity gala. They handed me a badge that said, "Event Staff," and expected me to smile. 3 weeks later, federal investigators were inside his firm, and no one ever laughed again. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone benefited from your loyalty while denying your worth, no matter where you're watching this from, the US, the UK, Europe, or anywhere in the world, this story is for you. Because betrayal sounds the same in every language. So hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. This isn't a story about loud revenge or empty drama. It's about quiet power, legal justice, and what happens when someone finally refuses to be erased. My name is Ariana Cole, and for most of my adult life, I believed that love meant endurance. I believed it meant staying quiet when something hurt. It meant being patient when you weren't seen. It meant proving your value through usefulness, not asking for recognition. I lived in Boston, a city that worships legacy the way other cities worship ambition. Here, power doesn't shout. It whispers. It wears tailored coats and old surnames. It gathers behind closed doors in brick townhouses that have seen centuries pass without ever opening themselves to outsiders. Brick sidewalks worn smooth by generations of certainty. Private clubs with no signs on the door. Last names that unlock opportunity before you ever introduce yourself. I married Nathan Hale, a man born into that world the way some people are born into sunlight, never questioning its warmth, never wondering what it would feel like to be without it. From the outside, our life looked perfect. A Beacon Hill townhouse with tall windows and crown molding. Dinner parties where the wine cost more than my first semester of college. Friends who spoke casually about senators the way others talk about neighbors. But inside that life, inside that marriage, I was slowly disappearing. Not in dramatic ways. Not with shouting or slammed doors. I disappeared in inches. In interruptions that went unnoticed. In ideas that were repeated by someone else and suddenly praised. In long workdays that ended with someone else's name on the success. I wasn't born into wealth. I wasn't cushioned by safety nets or family connections. I worked my way up the hard way. Scholarships, late nights, student loans that took a decade to erase. I earned my accounting degree while working weekends. I built my career one crisis at a time. Financial restructuring. Corporate triage. Crisis management. I specialized in the moments right before collapse. When companies were bleeding cash, regulators were circling, and employees were whispering about layoffs in break rooms. Those moments taught me something early on. Panic is loud. Competence is quiet. I learned how to read balance sheets like emotional maps. Where the fear was hiding. Where the lies were buried. Where the truth was trying to surface. That's how I helped Nathan. When his father's investment firm started unraveling, it didn't happen all at once. It never does. It began with small compliance issues. Reporting delays. Numbers that didn't quite line up quarter to quarter. Then came the letters. Regulatory inquiries. Investor concerns. Threats of audits whispered behind closed doors. Nathan froze. He was brilliant in meetings, confident in public, polished in every way that mattered socially, but crisis stripped him bare. He'd come home late, loosen his tie, stare at the walls like they had betrayed him. His partners panicked openly. His father, once a towering presence, withdrew completely. I remember the night Nathan's father sat at our dining table, glass of whiskey untouched, staring down at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "This firm is my father's legacy," he said quietly. "And I might be the one who destroys it." Nathan didn't answer. I did. I said, "Let me look at the books." That was the beginning. For nearly 2 years, my life narrowed into spreadsheets and sleepless nights. I worked before dawn, the city still dark and hushed. I worked after midnight, when the world finally stopped asking for anything else. I rebuilt financial records line by line. I corrected SEC reporting gaps that could have triggered massive penalties. I renegotiated debt with lenders who were already halfway out the door. I created compliance systems that prevented a federal audit before it could even begin. There were weeks I survived on coffee and adrenaline. There were nights I slept on the office couch with a blazer folded under my head like a pillow. I never put my name on anything. I told myself it didn't matter. That marriage meant shared victories. That love meant trust. Nathan started smiling again. His partners relaxed. The firm stabilized. People congratulated him. Brilliant turnaround, they said. You really stepped up, they told him. I stood a step behind, hands folded, smiling politely. I got good at polite smiles. Nathan would squeeze my hand afterward. Sometimes. Say, thank you in passing. Once half asleep, he murmured, couldn't have done it without you. It sounded like enough. His mother, Eleanor Hale, was different. She had the kind of elegance that never looks rushed. The kind that makes you feel slightly out of place no matter how well you're dressed. She spoke softly, but her words landed with precision. She loved introducing me. This is Nathan's wife, she'd say, lips curved in a pleasant smile. She keeps busy. Keeps busy. At first, I thought I was being sensitive. That maybe it was just her way of speaking. But then I noticed how often she used it. How carefully. Never, she's brilliant. Never, she saved the firm. Never, we couldn't have done this without her. Just, keeps busy. It followed me everywhere. At dinners. At charity events. At private gatherings where power exchanged hands over dessert. Keeps busy. As if my work were a hobby. As if my expertise were a way to pass time. As if I were filling the hours between more important lives. At first, I ignored it. I told myself it didn't matter what she thought. That result spoke louder than words. Then it started to hurt. I'd feel it settle in my chest when she said it, a small tightening, like holding your breath without realizing it. I'd replay the phrase later while brushing my teeth, while lying awake beside Nathan, while staring at my reflection in the dark. Keeps busy. And then slowly I realized something worse. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Because Eleanor knew exactly who I was. She knew what I'd done. She knew how close her family had come to ruin. And she also knew something else. Acknowledging me meant admitting dependence. And dependence threatened the hierarchy she protected at all costs. So she minimized me. Politely. Publicly. Perfectly. Nathan never corrected her. Sometimes I'd catch his eye when she said it, silently asking him to speak up. To say something. Anything. He'd smile. Change the subject. Pretend not to notice. That was when the loneliness began to feel heavier than the work. I started noticing other things too. How he referred to my career as, your consulting stuff. How he asked me to be home more when things stabilized, as if stability were permanent, as if crises didn't return, as if my value ended once his was restored. I still worked just as hard. Still saved companies. Still carried the weight quietly. But something inside me began to fracture. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough to let doubt seep in. I would stand in our kitchen late at night, the house quiet, Nathan asleep upstairs, and wonder how someone could be so essential and so invisible at the same time. I started keeping records. Not out of suspicion. Out of habit. In my line of work, documentation is survival. And some instinct, one I didn't yet understand, told me to preserve everything. Emails. Reports. Decisions made off the record. I told myself it was just professionalism. But deep down, something else was waking up. A realization I wasn't ready to name yet. That endurance without respect isn't love. It's erasure. And erasure, once you see it clearly, is impossible to unsee. The invitation arrived in a thick ivory envelope, embossed with gold lettering that felt heavier than paper should. The Hale Foundation Annual Gala. Black tie. Waterfront venue. Press expected. Nathan left it on the kitchen counter like it was nothing. Like it was routine. Big night, he said casually, loosening his tie. My mother's been planning it for months. I picked up the invitation and traced the raised lettering with my thumb. The date stood out immediately. I already knew what week it was. The same week the firm finalized its restructuring. The same week the last compliance risk officially closed. The same week the business Nathan's family had nearly lost was declared fully stabilized. It should have felt like a celebration. Instead, something cold slid into my stomach. I told myself I was imagining things. I always told myself that. In the days leading up to the gala, I worked more than usual. Not because I had to, but because staying busy was easier than sitting with the quiet unease that followed me through the house. Nathan was distracted. Restless. He spent more time on his phone. took calls in the other room, smiled at messages he didn't share. When I asked what time we should leave for the event, he didn't answer right away. "Don't stress too much about it," he said finally. "It's more about donors than family." That word again. Family. I laid out my dress the night before. Black, simple, elegant. The kind of dress that didn't ask for attention but held it anyway. I paired it with heels I rarely wore and jewelry I'd bought myself years ago, back when my success still felt like mine. Nathan barely looked up from his phone when I showed him. "It's fine," he said. "Just don't overdo it." I didn't ask what that meant. The venue sat along Boston Harbor, glass and steel catching the city lights like it was designed to be admired from every angle. Valets lined the entrance. Donors arrived in sleek cars, laughing easily, comfortable in their importance. Nathan left early. "Meeting the guys for a drink first," he said. "I'll see you there." I arrived alone. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it, that subtle shift in atmosphere, the way conversations briefly paused, eyes flicked toward me, then away. At the check-in table, the coordinator smiled too tightly. She scanned her tablet once. Then again. Her fingers hesitated. "I'm just going to print your badge," she said. She slid it across the table face down. I turned it over. Ariana Cole. Event support. For a second, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. I waited for the correction. The apology. The laugh. None came. "I think there's been a mistake," I said calmly. Her smile faltered. "I don't believe so." That's when I saw Eleanor Hale approaching, radiant in silver silk, every inch the woman who had mastered rooms like this long before I ever entered them. She glanced at the badge. Then at me. Perfectly pleasant. "Oh good," she said. "You found your assignment." My chest tightened. "I'm not staff," I said quietly. Eleanor leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough to sound kind. "Family seating is very limited this year," she said. "You understand how these things work." I didn't. "Not like this." She gestured subtly toward a side corridor. "Staff entrance is just over there." People were watching now. Pretending not to. Phones hovered just low enough to seem polite. I clipped the badge to my dress because my hands were steady, too steady, and something in me wanted to see how far they would take it. I walked into the ballroom. The Hale family table sat front and center, positioned perfectly for visibility. Crystal glasses. Place cards. Soft candlelight. 7 chairs. 8 names. 1 space left deliberately empty. I stood beside it, the badge heavy against my chest, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes settle onto me like pressure. No one spoke. The string quartet played on, uncertain. Then Nathan arrived. He looked relaxed, confident, comfortable. He saw the badge, saw the chair, saw me standing. And he laughed. Not awkwardly, not nervously, warmly. The same laugh he used when deals closed in his favor. The same laugh that once made me feel safe. "Come on," he said, reaching for a glass of wine that wasn't his. "Don't make this weird." Something cracked then. Not loudly. Not visibly. It was the sound of a final illusion breaking. I realized with stunning clarity that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't thoughtless cruelty. It was strategy. They had decided my place. Publicly. Permanently. The room waited for me to apologize. For me to laugh it off. For me to shrink. I didn't. I reached for my wedding ring. It slid off easily. Too easily. I placed it on the empty place setting, right where my name should have been. The soft clink it made against the glass cut through the music like a blade. "I'm not your staff," I said calmly. "And I'm not your wife." The silence was absolute. Nathan's smile vanished. Eleanor's eyes hardened. I turned and walked out. No rushing. No tears. Just the steady sound of my heels against marble as the life I had built behind me finally collapsed. Not because I destroyed it, but because I stopped holding it up. Outside, the cold air hit my lungs like a shock. I reached my car and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then, finally, I shook. Not from fear. From relief. Because in that moment, something fundamental changed. I understood the truth. I had spent years trying to earn a seat at a table built on my silence. And I was done asking. As I pulled away from the curb, the city lights blurred through tears I hadn't realized were there. I didn't know exactly what I would do next. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was the last time anyone would decide my worth for me. I didn't go home that night. I drove. No destination at first. Just movement. The city slid past my windows in streaks of amber and white. Familiar streets suddenly unfamiliar, like I was seeing Boston for the first time without permission. I parked near the harbor, engine idling, hands resting loosely on the steering wheel. My body felt hollow. Not broken. Empty. In the way a room feels after furniture is removed. Space where something heavy used to sit. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to explain myself to anyone. That was when I opened my laptop. The folder had existed for years. I'd named it Archive. Deliberately neutral. Not revenge. Not insurance. Just fact. Inside were documents I had never meant to use against Nathan. Not because they weren't damning, but because using them would mean accepting what I'd tried so hard to deny. Emails discussing investor funds rerouted for temporary personal use. Expense reports buried under shell accounts. Internal memos instructing staff to delay disclosures to avoid scrutiny. Violations of fiduciary duty. Misrepresentation. Breach of Massachusetts securities law. Nothing fabricated. Nothing exaggerated. Just truth. Truth carefully documented by a woman who understood that power never collapses from rumors, only from evidence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. Not angry. Just resolved. I wasn't doing this to punish him. I was doing it because the law existed for moments exactly like this, when powerful people believed decorum would protect them from consequence. I submitted the disclosure anonymously to the SEC whistleblower program, then to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, Financial Crimes Division. Every document time-stamped. Every claim cross-referenced. Every fact undeniable. When I closed my laptop, my hands didn't shake. I slept for the first time in weeks. Justice doesn't announce itself. It moves quietly. Over the next few weeks, the signs appeared in small ways. Nathan came home tense. Distracted. Short-tempered. He took calls in the hallway. Lowered his voice when I entered rooms. Started sleeping less. One night, I heard him pacing. Another night, he slammed a door. I didn't ask questions. I had already asked enough for a lifetime. It happened faster than I expected. Accounts were frozen pending investigation. Partners resigned, for personal reasons. Subpoenas followed. Regulators don't raise their voices. They don't humiliate you publicly. They simply remove the floor beneath your feet and let gravity do the rest. Nathan lost his license to manage investment funds. The firm dissolved quietly. No press release, no scandal. Just a notice filed. A legacy erased line by line. Eleanor stopped hosting events. The invitations dried up. Friends stopped calling. Because in their world, reputation is currency. And once it's devalued, no one wants to be seen holding it. Nathan tried to talk to me once. He stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow. Less certain. I don't understand how this happened, he said. I looked at him, really looked, and realized something surprising. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt peace. You never wanted to, I said. That was all. I moved out quietly. No drama. No lawyers screaming across conference tables. Just signatures and silence. I rented a small office near Back Bay. Exposed brick, large windows, nothing extravagant. I founded Cole Advisory Group. No legacy clients. No old money. Just businesses on the brink. The kind I'd always been good at saving. Word spread. Not because of who I married, but because of what I did. Companies trusted me because I told them the truth. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. I hired people who asked questions. Who documented everything. Who understood that integrity wasn't an aesthetic. It was a system. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes, I found the badge. Ariana Cole. Event support. I stared at it for a long time. Then I framed it. It hangs on my office wall now. Clients always ask about it. I tell them the truth. That was the night I stopped asking for permission to exist. They usually nod. Quietly. Like they understand more than they say. They thought humiliation would break me. They were wrong. It clarified me. Because the most dangerous thing you can do to someone who has been invisible for years is remind them of their worth. I didn't destroy anyone. I told the truth. And let the law do what it was designed to do. And I built a life where no one gets to decide my place at the table but me. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if you've been shrinking to survive, if endurance has started to feel like erasure, remember this. You don't need revenge. You need boundaries. And sometimes, the law. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and still changes everything. If this story hit something deep, tap like, it helps more than you think. Subscribe for more stories where power is challenged, truth is exposed, and justice doesn't need to shout to be devastating. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying comeback you've ever witnessed or lived through? Because sometimes, the quietest ending is the strongest one.